Welcome. And now, the Granite Peak Singers. Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation here in beautiful Prescott, Arizona. My name is Jack Wood and I'm the worship associate for today. We extend a warm welcome to everybody. We're glad that you're able to join us and hope you are in good health. And for those watching on Zoom, we wish you good health as well. We meet here to affirm our collective hope for peace. Peace in our community, peace in our nation, peace in our world. We also acknowledge that these lands that we love are the ancestral lands of the Yavapai people. This is the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. As an aside, don't let anybody know that I said diversity. Please join us after the service for coffee and socializing in small groups in Davis Hall. You'll have time to introduce yourself to each other shortly, and we invite you to please stay after the service and chat with a member or two. There are refreshments in Davis Hall across the foyer to enjoy together after the service. We thank our pianist, Lena Eubin, our wonderful choir, the Granite Peak Singers, with musical director Marshall Voigt, and all of our Sunday morning volunteers. Now, please take a moment to make sure that your cell phone is not going to go off during the service. We've got a few announcements. You probably saw some on the screen while you were waiting. You can also look in the weekly Peak newsletter and on our website. And we have some announcements at the welcome table as well. We have a couple special announcements from the membership committee. Today's the day. If you're ready to sign our membership book, this is the day. You should have attended one of our information meetings or talked with our minister or a committee member about preconditions, and make sure you are fully informed. Meet in Davis Hall near Reverend Rogers' office. We welcome you. We also have another message, a message from Prescott College. Prescott College's social justice departments are inviting us to attend an on-campus conference from February 28th through March 2nd. During the weekend conference, participants will engage in a conversation about how to organize communities experiencing oppression. To attend the conference, they have asked each of us to pay a nominal fee using what they call a pay-what-you-can model. More information can be found at the Prescott College website. Back closer to home here at Granite Peak, Sandra Palacios is our Faith Development Coordinator. She teaches ages 5 and older across the street at our Faith Development Building. We also have a nursery for kids under 5. And now, Reverend Roger is going to welcome visitors.
If you're here for the first time and you are not too shy to raise your hand and tell us where you're from, I will give you the gift of a very nice pin with the church's name on it. Is anybody here for the first time? You don't have to raise your hand, but if you don't get the pin. And I actually don't see anybody. But if you didn't raise your hand, we're still really glad you're here. And we do invite you to stay afterward for what is one of the finest coffee hours held in any church in Prescott after the service.
Amen.
And of course, if you're a regular and you see somebody you don't know, reach out and talk to them, get to know them during the coffee hour.
And now I believe we have a congregational moment video.
Hi, my name is Lee Phillips. I live in Prescott Valley with my son Craig Phillips and Ed Rossich. The first time I went to Granite Peak was in the 90s, and we were visiting Randy and Vlasta Phillips. And when we got to Granite Peak, there was a pagan affair going on. People had togas, they had laurel crowns, they had little twigs, and I thought, oh my gosh, what kind of a place this is. But in 2009, I joined Granite Peak, and Ed and I had a commitment ceremony there, and we felt we had found our home. We love the Sunday services. They're varied and they're interesting. Oh, needless to say, we love the coffee hour. And I've been part of the small group ministry since I joined Granite Peak. And I I was in chalice groups and women's groups. It's a chance to get to know people and understand people and love them. And also a chance to understand myself. It's been fun to help in fundraisings. And it was interesting when I got here to Prescott Valley. I was playing bridge one day, and a woman at the table said, in a whisper, she said, "Are you liberal?" And I said, "Yes." And at Granite Peak, we don't have to whisper. We can say aloud our political views, our theological views. It's wonderful. And Granite Peak is a safe place. It's a place where we care and love each other. And that's why I support Granite Peak. And I thank you for everyone who pledges and who volunteers also.
Thank you, Lee. We begin our service in the Unitarian Universalist tradition of lighting the chalice. Our chalice lighter this morning is Bonnie Fort. Today we light the chalice with these words. We light this chalice, a symbol of our heritage and gratitude for this beloved community.
The words of gathering are from our hymnal. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes, this community of laughter and silence, of memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. And I invite you to stand as you're able to do so and sing Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, number 361.
Joyful day, enter, rejoice.
be in the words on the screen, our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together.
As we prepare to take the offering this morning, let us embrace the feeling of connection and community that we have when we gather here together each week. Let us remember that this congregation and its programs are supported by your generosity. We will now take the offering. We acknowledge the generosity of spirit expressed through this offering. What is given in love is received in gratitude. Blessed be. I'm not listed on the order of service, but Reverend Fritts has allotted me some time this morning to relate a personal experience. This story begins in December 2016, when my longtime primary care physician told me that he was unable to increase my dosage on medications to treat my high blood pressure because it could be dangerous to my heart. He said I needed to see an electrician, and he could refer me to one in Phoenix. I actually needed to see an electrophysiologist. Try saying that 3 times fast. A specialized cardiologist who treats the electrical system of the heart and its associated heart rhythms. I met with the specialist, let's call him Dr. K, and no, not that Dr. K, in early January. After multiple tests, EKGs, and an echocardiogram, Dr. K explained that I had sick sinus syndrome, where the sinoatrial node of the heart, where the sinoatrial node, which is the heart's natural pacemaker, weakens in some people over time and becomes less able to generate electrical impulses to create heartbeats and heart rhythms. When the sinus node cannot create that electrical impulse, the heartbeat stops. Not so good. Dr. K said an artificial pacemaker could be implanted in my chest wall to supplement the electrical charges being generated in my heart. I was sent home after that initial meeting with a Holter monitor to wear for 10 days. It would monitor my heart rhythms and serve as a continuous EKG. Over the 10 days, I was called twice by the doctor's office. The first time, I learned that my heart rate had dropped into the high 30s. The second time, the nurse called me while I was driving and informed me that my heart rate had dropped into the 20s. The average adult heart rate is between 55 and 85 beats per minute. This was getting serious. Dr. K and I decided the following day to advance my pacemaker into the beginning of February, a week away, rather than after April 15th, when my tax returns would be done. My son Brian volunteered to fly in from San Francisco the day before the procedure to be with me and to drive me home the day after the implant. I picked him up at the airport the night prior to the appointment. The following morning, we arrived at the Arizona Heart Hospital. I was ushered into pre-op, and the medically necessary indignities commenced. The shaving of chest hair, the infamous hospital Johnny, the IV catheter on the back of the hand, and then waiting until your turn arrived. My turn came soon enough. Nurses wheeled me into the operating theater. The lighting was so bright. I felt so cold. Nurses and doctors in green scrubs were busily preparing, talking in short sentences. A nurse leaned over me and said the sedation was beginning. "How do you feel?" she asked. "It's Groundhog Day," I uttered, and then everything went dark. In the week leading up to that procedure, I thought about the scheduled date, February 2nd, and that caused me to think about the 1990s movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray and Andy McDowell. It's a comedy about a Pittsburgh TV weatherman, Bill Murray, who was sent once again to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania for the annual Groundhog Day event. He doesn't want to be there, and things go not so well on February 2nd. He stays overnight and plans to leave town the next morning. But when he awakens the next day, it's February 2nd all over again. And this continues day after day, February 2nd after February 2nd. No one else realizes it. He is stuck on Groundhog Day. On the afternoon of February 2nd, 2017, I awoke in a private room on the 3rd floor of the Heart Hospital. I would be there overnight. I sensed I would be okay. I was still alive. Apparently, I survived the procedure. But I had this nagging feeling that perhaps February 2nd, Groundhog Day, was not done with me. The next morning, I awoke to a nurse urging me to wake up so she could administer some medications. "What day is it?" I asked. "It's Friday," she responded. "What about the date? What's the date?" "It's February 3rd, she answered. I had a sense of relief. I would not be ensnared in a crazy series of February 2nds where I had to face repeated pacemaker implants. I was free of my irrational concern of a never-ending Groundhog Day for me. Instead, I could look forward to additional days and months and years of life, thanks to medical personnel, bioengineers, computer scientists, and family and friends. It's reassuring to know that we won't be condemned to repeat unpleasant days in our lives in an unending loop. Each morning that we awaken is a day of possibilities and opportunities. Many days will have problems or challenges, but navigating through those difficult times will likely yield new awakenings with more optimism and hope. May Punxsutawney Phil not see his shadow in 2025, and tomorrow morning, when you wake up, may you see February 3rd on the calendar. Thank you. And now we go to joys and sorrows. I guess my joy is that I'm here with you today, obviously. Our beloved community is the heart of Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist congregation. As we experience a time of meditation and music, we will take a few moments to silently acknowledge the joys and concerns of our hearts and of our minds. If there is an event which moves you to joy or concern, hope or gratitude, I invite you to come forward silently and drop a pebble from this dish into our communal water as an affirmation of our connection to one another. I'm going to drop a pebble today. I learned this morning that one of my aunts died a few days ago at the age of 104. Yeah, she was old. And her brother, I think it was probably a younger brother, was still living with her in her home. She had to leave the home a little while ago. She had to go to the hospital, and then she had to go to a nursing home. And my cousin, Robbie, said that he put her into a nursing home where her daughter, Denise, who was in her 70s, has been for a few years, so they could be together. amazing how Lena always times that perfectly, isn't it? Thank you, Lena. May our joys and concerns, surrounded by the healing communal water of our beloved community, be acknowledged here today. So may it be. And before I leave the stage here, somebody slipped me a last-minute announcement. Bev Bostrom says, photos today in Davis Hall after the service. Thank you.
Religion, as a set of right beliefs and right observations, becomes divisive and absurd. Religion as a walking with others, listening to others, sharing with others, is not a creed, but a way of life that makes love beautiful.
This is my first time up here on this podium. My name is Marshall. I'm one of the choir directors. The anthem today is a piece called "We Will Not Stop Singing," written by the Chapin sisters. They're the daughters of Tom Chapin and the nieces of Harry Chapin. They're a folk sort of roots duo, amazing music, but they wrote this song 6 or 8 years ago, and for me it has every element of what a sort of social justice protest anthem ought to be, and it seemed like the right choice for today. When you catch on, feel free to sing along with us. We'd love to sing this all together.
We will not
Thank you. In 1912, the French sociologist Émile Durkheim published a book called Elementary Forms of Religious Life. Durkheim wrote that the aim of worship is not to tie people to God, but to connect people to each other. Religious communities, he wrote, form as people suffer through a crisis together. Then people create a ritual in which they reenact that crisis on a regular basis. This binds the group together into a community. Each time they act out the ritual, they relive the original common crisis. In other words, a worship service is a reenactment of a key event that formed the identity of the community. The Passover meal is an example. Annually, it reenacts the crisis of the Jews escaping Egypt and traveling north to what is now Israel. Another example is communion in Christian churches. The bread and wine are a reenactment of the Last Supper before the crisis of Jesus' death. In some churches, they reenact the Last Supper every week. Such rituals bind people together into a strong religious community. These worship services help people connect to each other and share the happiest and the saddest events in their lives. In our religion, we reenact every Sunday the Protestant Reformation. Before the Reformation, only Catholic priests read the Bible, and all the worship services were conducted in Latin. Martin Luther argued that everyone should have direct access to the Scripture, to the Bible. Because most people did not own a Bible and most people could not read, Luther designed a worship service that, besides communion, included a biblical reading. The reading was in the people's language, in his case in German, the language his congregation spoke. Then Luther followed this reading from the Bible with a lecture explaining to the congregation what the biblical passage that he had just read, what it meant. He dressed himself in a black robe so the congregation would associate him with university professors who at that time wore black robes when they lectured. Luther also translated the Bible into the German language. With the invention of movable type, it became cheaper to print Bibles. More people could learn to read and buy a Bible and have direct access to the Scripture. Soon after the Reformation started, people in Europe reading the Bible realized, now only some people realized this, that Jesus was a human being and not God. These folks were called Unitarians because they rejected the Trinity. This resulted in the creation of the Unitarian Church in Transylvania and then later in Great Britain and the United States. And also in about 1750, a few people came up with the idea of universal salvation, the belief that we all go to heaven when we die. This resulted in the creation of the Universalist Church. Out of the Reformation arose the idea of freedom of the pulpit where I get to say whatever I want, and freedom of the pew, where you get to disagree with me all you want. These freedoms have a history going back to Transylvania under the reign of King John Sigmundsson, the only reigning European monarch who was Unitarian. In 1668, King John promulgated the Edict of Torda. Regarding freedom of the pulpit, the edict said, "Preachers everywhere are to preach the gospel according to their understanding of it. Let no superintendent or anyone else violently or abusively act towards the preacher. No one may threaten another on account of his teaching with imprisonment or deprivation of office." Freedom of the pulpit. Then the edict expressed freedom of the pew this way: if the parish, the congregation, willing receives the minister's truth, good. But if not, let there be no compulsion on it to do so. I can't make you agree with me. Today, this means in Unitarian Universalist churches that I speak only for myself. Each of you is free to agree with me or disagree with me or just take a nap. Now, freedom of the pulpit is why I frown when any of you applaud after the sermon. Applause implies that everyone enthusiastically agrees with me, and in our congregation, that is never the case. So out of respect for our diversity, I discourage applause after the sermon. You may applaud the choir as much as you want. Still, although we have freedom of the pulpit, there are limits. The story is told of Reverend John Weiss, minister of the First Unitarian Society of New Bedford, Massachusetts. In the 1850s, Reverend Weiss preached sermons against slavery for 23 Sundays in a row. Eventually, the congregation asked him to leave. Not wishing to suffer the same fate, I resist the temptation to preach every Sunday about the deeply troubling actions of our current president. Instead, I try to vary my topics from week to week. Although Martin Luther made the sermon the central focus of worship, he kept communion as part of the Reformation worship service. In the 20th century, most American Unitarian and Universalist churches stopped serving communion as part of their Sunday worship and donated their beautiful communion silver to local museums for display. Martin Luther had announcements as part of his service. He often condemned his congregation for not giving enough to support him. Today we continue that practice, but we struggle to keep our announcements short. One Unitarian minister told his congregation that an announcement was only allowed if the building was on fire, and then only if it was submitted in writing before the service started. Martin Luther was also a musician and a composer. He gave hymn singing a renewed role in worship. Today, music remains central to our worship experience. When we sing together, we are brought together in a community. We experience unity and harmony. If we have this experience several times with the same piece of music, we begin to associate that music with a feeling of wholeness. In Phoenix, when I was growing up every Sunday, we would sing a short hymn called a doxology. It's number 281 in the gray hymnal. I'm not going to sing it, but here are the words. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land by every tongue. And I associate these words, this doxology, with liberal religion, with freedom of belief, with a community of people who try to be tolerant and loving. Copying the Protestant tradition, many Unitarian Universalist churches say a unison covenant at the beginning of the service. And we did this morning. We followed a common practice of using words written by Reverend James Blake. He wrote these in 1891 when he was minister of the Unitarian Church of Evanston, Illinois. Reverend Blake wrote several different versions of the covenant, and he would test them out with the congregation, a small group of about 30, 40 people, getting feedback from the congregation each Sunday. His final version is covenant number 473 in our hymnal. I was minister in Evanston, Illinois for 8 years in the last century. And every Sunday, the congregation stood and said the words, as they told me they had done every Sunday starting in 1891. There were only a few people there who still remembered the beginning. Now, the way they did it in Evanston was this way. The minister says, "Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law." Then the congregation would stand, and they would say, standing together, "This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another." Now, ritual can come out of habit, unintentionally. One small child in Evanston, reading the order of service, said to her mother, "The last line is missing." "No, dear," said the mother, "it's all there." "No," said the child. "As the last line of the covenant, Reverend Fritts always says the same thing." Please be seated. So for this child, part of our great covenant was the chance to sit down. American Unitarian Universalists have added a new weekly ritual that comes out of the crisis of the Second World War. In April of 1941, the Unitarian Service Committee had an office in Lisbon, Portugal, dedicated to helping rescue Europe's intellectual, academic, and political leaders who were refugees from the Nazis. Originally, the flaming chalice was a two-dimensional image stamped on documents created by the service committee to help refugees escape the persecution on the eve of World War II. The artist Hans Deutsch, himself a refugee from Paris, created the design. Deutsch was working under the direction of the service committee's director, Reverend Charles Joy, who believed that such a logo would make the paperwork look more official. People were impressed with stamps on paper. At some point, the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee adopted the flaming chalice as their official logo. In the 1970s, the Unitarian Universalist Association also embraced the flaming chalice as its logo. But also, and look at ours today, it shows this, the two circles around the chalice. And these two circles represent the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961. By the 1980s, hundreds of Unitarian Universalist communities across Canada and the United States were lighting a chalice at the start of the Sunday worship. The service committee in Lisbon had helped more than 2,000 refugees gain passage back in 1940. When I watched the chalice being lit on Sunday, I remember that history. Now, what did Durkheim say? Religious communities form as people suffer through a crisis together. Then people create a ritual in which they reenact that crisis. This ritual binds the group together in a community. Well, during my 50 years of giving sermons, my God, 50 years, I have seen worship practices come and go. In the late 1970s, many congregations added a sermon discussion called a talkback as part of the hour worship service. During the talkback, members of the congregation would dare to question the minister after the sermon. A wireless mic would be brought to them, giving them a chance to make a comment about the sermon or ask a question. Some people loved this interaction. Others found that week after week the same people spoke. It turned the worship service more into an intellectual discussion. Gradually, this practice came to an end in most congregations. Another practice that took hold and has so far not faded is the singing of the hymn Spirit of Life. The author, Carolyn McDay, says that she wrote it late one night in the early 1980s after attending a meeting for peace and democracy in Central America. After the meeting, when she got home to her home in a Boston suburb, she went to her piano and she wrote a singing prayer, Spirit of Life. The hymn appeared in the Gray Hymnal published in 1993, and soon congregations started singing Spirit of Life every week. For some, the word Spirit of Life served as a euphemism for God. For others who do not believe in God, the hymn is just an expression of compassion, justice, community, freedom, reverence for nature, and the mystery of life. Spoken joys and concerns became popular in the 1980s. People would come forward and say a few words about something joyful or something sad. This became a controversial practice in most of our churches. Some people would look forward to it. Others saw it as a false intimacy or an opportunity for self-indulgence. As an alternative to verbal sharing of joys and concerns, votive candles appeared in our churches after the turn of the century. In the Roman Catholic Church, candles are often placed before a statue of the Virgin Mary. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, candles are lit before icons, usually of Jesus Christ. And some high Anglican churches also have votive candles. In our churches, when votive candles were introduced in place of spoken joys and concerns, many people would line up during the service to light a candle. However, perhaps because of the fear of fire or the smell of burning wax, about 10 years ago, some churches started to replace votive candles with the practice of placing small stones in a bowl of water. I first saw this practice in a church in Florida about 10 years ago. When I was serving a church in Pennsylvania 2 years ago, I found that they were also dropping rocks in a bowl of water. And when I arrived in Prescott in September, I found that you had also included this practice in your worship service. Now, to light a votive candle for someone means that you will say a prayer for them, and the candle symbolizes your prayers. Dropping a stone in the water is another way of saying a Unitarian Universalist prayer with the stone as the prayer. Another recent innovation is the idea of worship associates. We have one here just as an example. This was developed in Oakland in 1988. It has gradually spread to other congregations, including our congregation here in Prescott. Worship associates are members who become directly involved in worship. The hope is that by having different voices on Sunday, the service will become more diverse, and members will have a meaningful way to participate. In some churches, the minister shares the text of the sermon with the worship associate, and then the associate is invited to write and read a short reflection. Being a worship associate encourages people to learn about their religion and the worship tradition. If you would like to apply to be a worship associate, let me know. Let me know. And put it in writing or I'll forget. About 20 years ago, the nature of worship in many of our churches changed. I started to hear that traditional Christian churches were adding big screens to their sanctuaries. It was a point of pride among most Unitarian Universalist congregations that we were not like the conservative evangelical Christians with their big projection screens. We had good taste. We were not going to join the projection screen fad. In 2006, I visited an Assemblies of God church, a church with 6,000 members. The service I attended had 2,000 members, and I saw screens used in worship. The static images of paintings in the traditional worship service were replaced by dynamic, changing images. The room was filled with these 2,000 people, and they all seemed to love the approach. I realized the world was changing once again, and I would need to learn yet another new skill. And I wonder today, does a screen in worship comfort and inspire Unitarian Universalists? We're working on that one. Each week, I think about all of you. I think about the issues in your lives, health issues, relationship issues, work issues, local and national political issues. I think about the good news that you share with me, stories about weddings, a new job, a family gathering, an enjoyable trip. I try to imagine this worship service, and I wonder what words, what hymns, what images you might find inspiring. I know that each of you have your own preferences. Durkheim wrote that the aim of worship is not to tie people to God, but to connect people to each other. My hope is that each Sunday, in this diverse group of people, you will find something that gives you a feeling of connection. A rabbi put it this way: we don't go to church or synagogue at a stipulated time because God keeps office hours. We go because that is when we know there will be other people there seeking the same kind of encounter we are seeking. The purpose is for us to join in song and prayer with our fellow worshipers, to find God in the experience of transcending our isolation, our individuality, and becoming part of a greater whole. When the service works, we will feel different about ourselves and the world for having gone through that experience. Let's sing our closing hymn, number 360, Here We Have Gathered. So please remain standing if you're able to do so, and join the hand of someone next to you. Join hands. Reverend David Bumbaugh wrote, "May this church be dedicated to the proposition that beneath all our differences and behind all our diversity, there is a unity which makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars." Amen. Let's say together the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.